And what was the rest, Gorda? The next thing the Nawal wanted me to do was to try to find houses or buildings in my dreams and look at them, trying not to dissolve the images. He said that the art of the dreamer is to hold the image of his dream, because that's what we do anyway during all our lives. What did he mean by that? Our art as ordinary people is that we know how to hold the image of what we are looking at. The Nawal said that we do that, but we don't know how. We just do it. That is, our bodies do it. In dreaming, we have to do the same thing, except that in dreaming, we have to learn how to do it. We have to struggle not to look, but merely to glance and yet hold the image. The Nawal told me to find in my dreams a brace for my belly button. It took a long time because I didn't understand what he meant. He said that in dreaming we pay attention with the belly button. Therefore, it has to be protected. We need a little warmth or a feeling that something is pressing the belly button in order to hold the images in our dreams. I found a pebble in my dreams that fit my belly button, and the Nawal made me look for it day after day in waterholes and canyons until I found it. I made a belt for it, and I still wear it day and night. Wearing it made it easier for me to hold images in my dreams. Then the Nawal gave me the task of going to specific places in my dreaming. I was doing really well with my task, but at that time I lost my form and I began to see the eye in front of me. The Nawal said that the eye had changed everything, and he gave me orders to begin using the eye to pull myself away. He said that I didn't have time to get to my double in dreaming, but that the eye was even better. I felt cheated. Now I don't care. I've used that eye the best way I could. I let it pull me in my dreaming. I close my eyes and fall asleep like nothing, even in the daytime or anywhere. The eye pulls me and I enter into another world. Most of the time I just wander around in it. The Nawal told me and the little sisters that during our menstrual periods, dreaming becomes power. I get a little crazy for one thing. I become more daring. And like the Nawal showed us, a crack opens in front of us during those days. You're not a woman, so it can't make any sense to you. But 2 days before her period, a woman can open that crack and step through it into another world. With her left hand, she followed the contour of an invisible line that seemed to run vertically in front of her at arm's length. During that time, a woman, if she wants to, can let go of the images of the world. La Gorda went on. That's the crack between the worlds. And as the Nawal said, it is right in front of all of us women. The reason the Nawal believes women are better sorcerers than men is because they always have the crack in front of them, while a man has to make it. Well, it was during my periods that I learned in dreaming to fly with the lines of the world. I learned to make sparks with my body to entice the lines, and then I learned to grab them. And that's all I have learned in dreaming so far. I laughed and told her that I had nothing to show for my years of dreaming. You've learned how to call the allies in dreaming, she said with great assurance. I told her that Don Juan had taught me to make those sounds. She did not seem to believe me. The allies must come to you, then, because they're seeking his luminosity, she said. The luminosity he left with you. He told me that every sorcerer has only so much luminosity to give away. So he parcels it out to all his children in accordance with an order that comes to him from somewhere out there in that vastness. In your case, he even gave you his own call. She clicked her tongue and winked at me. If you don't believe me, she went on, why don't you make the sound the Nahual taught you and see if the allies come to you? I felt reluctant to do it. Not because I believed that my sound would bring anything, but because I did not want to humor her. She waited for a moment, and when she was sure I was not going to try, she put her hand to her mouth and imitated my tapping sound to perfection. She played it for 5 or 6 minutes, stopping only to breathe. See what I mean? She asked, smiling. The allies don't give a fig about my calling, no matter how close it is to yours. Now try it yourself. I tried. After a few seconds, I heard the call being answered. La Gorda jumped to her feet. I had the clear impression that she was more surprised than I was. She hurriedly made me stop, turned off the lantern, and gathered up my notes. She was about to open the front door, but she stopped short. A most frightening sound came from just outside the door. It sounded to me like a growl. It was so horrendous and ominous that it made us both jump back away from the door. My physical alarm was so intense that I would have fled if I had had a place to go. Something heavy was leaning against the door. It made the door creak. I looked at La Gorda. She seemed to be even more alarmed. She was still standing with her arm outstretched as if to open the door. Her mouth was open. She seemed to have been frozen in mid-action. The door was about to be sprung open any moment. There were no bangs on it, just a terrifying pressure, not only on the door, but all around the house. La Gorda stood up and told me to embrace her quickly from behind, locking my hands around her waist over her belly button. She performed then a strange movement with her hands. It was as though she were flipping a towel while holding it at the level of her eyes. She did it 4 times. Then she made another strange movement. She placed her hands at the middle of her chest with the palms up, one above the other without touching. Her elbows were straight out to her sides. She clasped her hands as if she had suddenly grabbed 2 unseen bars. She slowly turned her hands over until the palms were facing down, and then she made a most beautiful exertive movement. A movement that seemed to engage every muscle in her body. It was as though she were opening a heavy sliding door that offered a great resistance. Her body shivered with the exertion. Her arms moved slowly, as if opening a very, very heavy door until they were fully extended laterally. I had the clear impression that as soon as she opened that door, a wind rushed through. That wind pulled us, and we actually went through the wall. Or rather, the walls of the house went through us. Or perhaps all three. La Gorda, the house, and myself went through the door she had opened. All of a sudden, I was out in an open field. I could see the dark shapes of the surrounding mountains and trees. I was no longer holding onto La Gorda's waist. A noise above me made me look up, and I saw her hovering perhaps 10 feet above me like the black shape of a giant kite. I felt a terrible itch in my belly button, and then La Gorda plummeted down to the ground at top speed. But instead of crashing, she came to a soft, total halt. At the moment that La Gorda landed, the itch in my umbilical region turned into a horribly exhausting nervous pain. It was as if her landing were pulling my insides out. I screamed in pain at the top of my voice. Then La Gorda was standing next to me, desperately out of breath. I was sitting down. We were again in the room of Don Gennaro's house where we had been. La Gorda seemed unable to catch her breath. She was drenched in perspiration. "We've got to get out of here," she muttered. It was a short drive to the little sister's house. None of them was around. La Gorda lit a lantern and led me directly to the open-air kitchen in back. There she undressed herself and asked me to bathe her like a horse by throwing water on her body. I took a small tub full of water and proceeded to pour it gently on her, but she wanted me to drench her. She explained that a contact with the Allies, like the one we had, produced a most injurious perspiration that had to be washed off immediately. She made me take off my clothes and then drenched me in ice-cold water. Then she handed me a clean piece of cloth, and we dried ourselves as we walked back into the house. She sat on the big bed in the front room after hanging the lantern on the wall above it. Her knees were up, and I could see every part of her body. I hugged her naked body, and it was then that I realized what Doña Soledad had meant when she said that La Gorda was the Nahual's woman. She was formless like Don Juan. I could not possibly think of her as a woman. I started to put on my clothes. She took them away from me. She said that before I could wear them again, I had to sun them. She gave me a blanket to put over my shoulders and got another one for herself. That attack of the Allies was truly scary, she said, as we sat down on the bed. We were really lucky that we could get out of their grip. I had no idea why the Nahual told me to go to Gennaro's with you. Now I know. That house is where the Allies are the strongest. They missed us by the skin of our teeth. We were lucky that I knew how to get out. How did you do it, Gorda? I really don't know, she said. I simply did it. My body knew how, I suppose. But when I want to think how I did it, I can't. This was a great test for both of us. Until tonight, I didn't know that I could open the eye. But look what I did. I actually opened the eye, just as the Nahual said I could. I've never been able to do it until you came along. I've tried, but it never worked. This time, the fear of those allies made me just grab the eye the way the Nahual told me to, by shaking it 4 times in its 4 directions. He said that I should shake it as I shake a bed sheet, and then I should open it as a door by holding it right at the middle. The rest was very easy. Once the door was opened, I felt a strong wind pulling me instead of blowing me away. The trouble, the Nahual said, is to return. You have to be very strong to do that. The Nahual and Gennaro and Eligio could go in and out of that eye like nothing. For them, the eye was not even an eye. They said it was an orange light, like the sun. And so were the Nahual and Gennaro an orange light when they flew. I'm still very low on the scale. The Nahual said that when I do my flying, I spread out and look like a pile of cow dung in the sky. I have no light. That's why the return is so dreadful for me. Tonight you helped me and pulled me back twice. The reason I showed you my flying tonight was because the Nahual gave me orders to let you see it, no matter how difficult or crummy it is. With my flying, I was supposed to be helping you, the same way you were supposed to be helping me when you showed me your double. I saw your whole maneuver from the door. You were so busy feeling sorry for Josefina that your body didn't notice my presence. I saw how your double came out from the top of your head. It wriggled out like a worm. I saw a shiver that began in your feet and went through your body, and then your double came out. It was like you, but very shiny. It was like the Nahual himself. That's why the sisters were petrified. I knew they thought that it was the Nahual himself. But I couldn't see all of it. I missed the sound because I have no attention for it. I beg your pardon? The double needs a tremendous amount of attention. The Nahual gave that attention to you, but not to me. He told me that he had run out of time. She said something else about a certain kind of attention, but I was very tired. I fell asleep, so suddenly that I did not even have time to put my notes away. Chapter 4, The Gennaros. I woke up around 8 the next morning and found that La Gorda had sunned my clothes and made me breakfast. We ate in the kitchen in the dining area. When we had finished, I asked her about Lydia, Rosa, and Josefina. They seemed to have vanished from the house. They are helping Soledad, she said. She's getting ready to leave. Where's she going? Somewhere away from here, She has no more reason to stay. She was waiting for you, and you have already come. Are the little sisters going with her? No, they just don't want to be here today. It looks as if today is not a good day for them to stick around. Well, why isn't it a good day? The Gennaros are coming to see you today, and the girls don't get along with them. If all of them are here together, they'll get into a most dreadful fight. The last time that happened, they nearly killed one another. Do they fight physically? You bet they do. All of them are very strong, and none of them wants to take second place. The Nahual told me that that would happen, but I am powerless to stop them. And not only that, but I have to take sides, so it's a mess. How do you know that the Gennaros are coming today? I haven't talked to them. I just know that they will be here today. That's all. Do you know that because you see, Gorda? That's right. I see them coming, and one of them is coming directly to you because you're pulling him. I assured her that I was not pulling anyone in particular. I said that I had not revealed to anyone the purpose of my trip, but that it had to do with something I had to ask Pablito and Nestor. She smiled coyly and said that fate had paired me with Pablito, that we were very alike, and that undoubtedly he was going to see me first. She added that everything that happened to a warrior could be interpreted as an omen. Thus, my encounter with Soledad was an omen of what I was going to find out on my visit. I asked her to explain her point. The men will give you very little this time, she said. It's the women who will rip you to shreds, as Soledad did. That's what I would say if I read the omen. You're waiting for the Gennaros, but they are men like you. And look at this other omen. They are a little bit behind. I would say a couple of days behind. That's your fate, as well as theirs, as men, to be always a couple of days behind. Behind what, Gorda? Behind everything. Behind us women, for instance. She laughed and patted my head. No matter how stubborn you are, she went on, you have to admit that I'm right. Wait and see. Did the Nahual tell you that men are behind women? I asked. Sure he did, she replied. All you have to do is look around. I do, Gorda, but I don't see any such thing. Women are always behind. They are dependent on men. She laughed. Her laughter was not scornful or bitter. It was rather a clear sound of joyfulness. You know the world of people better than I do, she said forcefully. But right now, I'm formless, and you're not. I'm telling you, women are better sorcerers because there is a crack in front of our eyes, and there is none in front of yours. She did not seem angry, but I felt obliged to explain that I asked questions and made comments, not because I was attacking or defending any given point, but because I wanted her to talk. She said that she had done nothing else but talk since the moment we met, and that the Nahual had trained her to talk because her task was the same as mine, to be in the world of people. Everything we say, she went on, is a reflection of the world of people, You will find out before your visit is over that you talk and act the way you do because you're clinging to the human form, just as the Gennaros and the little sisters are clinging to the human form when they fight to kill one another. But aren't all of you supposed to cooperate with Pablito, Nestor, and Benigno? Gennaro and the Nahual told every one of us that we should live in harmony and help and protect one another, because we are alone in the world. Pablito was left in charge of us four, but he's a coward. If it were left up to him, he would let us die like dogs. When the Nahual was around, though, Pablito was very nice to us and took very good care of us. Everyone used to tease him and joke that he took care of us as if we were his wives. The Nahual and Gennaro told him, not too long before they left, that he had a real chance to become the Nahual someday, because we might become his four winds, his four corners. Pablito understood it to be his task, and from that day on, he changed. He became insufferable. He began to order us around as if we were really his wives. I asked the Nahual about Pablito's chances, and he told me that I should know that everything in a warrior's world depends on personal power, and personal power depends on impeccability. If Pablito were impeccable, he would have a chance. I laughed when he told me that. I know Pablito very well, but the Nahual explained to me that I shouldn't take it so lightly. He said that warriors always have a chance, no matter how slim. He made me see that I was a warrior myself and that I shouldn't hinder Pablito with my thoughts. He said that I should turn them off and let Pablito be. That the impeccable thing for me to do was to help Pablito in spite of what I knew about him. I understood what the Nahual said. Besides, I have my own debt with Pablito, and I welcomed the opportunity to help him. But I also knew that no matter how I helped him, he was going to fail. I knew all along that he didn't have what it takes to be like the Nahual. Pablito is very childish. He won't accept his defeat. He's miserable because he's not impeccable. And yet, he's still trying in his thoughts to be like the Nahual. How did he fail? As soon as the Nahual left, Pablito had a deadly run-in with Lydia. Years ago, the Nahual had given him the task of being Lydia's husband, just for appearances. The people around here thought that she was his wife. Lydia didn't like that one bit. She's very tough. The truth of the matter is that Pablito has always been scared to death of her. They could never get along together, and they tolerated each other only because the Nahual was around. But when he left, Pablito got crazier than he already was and became convinced that he had had enough personal power to take us as his wives. The three Gennaros got together and discussed what Pablito should do, and decided that he should take the toughest woman first, Lydia. They waited until she was alone, and then all three of them came into the house and grabbed her by the arms and threw her on the bed. Pablito got on top of her. She thought at first that the Gennaros were joking, but when she realized that they were serious, she hit Pablito with her head in the middle of his forehead and nearly killed him. The Gennaros fled, and Nestor had to tend to Pablito's wound for months. Is there something that I can do to help them understand? No, unfortunately, understanding is not their problem. All 6 of them understand very well. The real trouble is something else. Something very ugly that no one can help them with. They indulge in not trying to change. Since they know they won't succeed in changing no matter how much they try or want to or need to, they have given up trying altogether. That's as wrong as feeling disappointed with our failures. The Nahual told each of them that warriors, both men and women, must be impeccable in their effort to change, in order to scare the human form and shake it away. After years of impeccability, a moment will come, the Nahual said, when the form cannot stand it any longer and it leaves, just as it left me. In doing so, of course, it injures the body and can even make it die. But an impeccable warrior survives, always. A sudden knock at the front door interrupted her. La Gorda stood up and went over to unlatch the door. It was Lydia. She greeted me very formally and asked La Gorda to go with her. They left together. I welcomed being alone. I worked on my notes for hours. The open-air dining area was cool and had very good light. La Gorda returned around noon. She asked me if I wanted to eat. I was not hungry, but she insisted that I eat. She said that contacts with the Allies were very debilitating and that she felt very weak herself. After eating, I sat down with La Gorda and was getting ready to ask her about dreaming when the front door opened loudly and Pablito walked in. He was panting. He obviously had been running and appeared to be in a state of great excitation. He stood at the door for a moment, catching his breath. He hadn't changed much. He seemed a bit older or heavier, or perhaps only more muscular. He was, however, still very lean and wiry. His complexion was pale, as if he had not been in the sun for a long time. The brownness of his eyes was accentuated by a faint mark of weariness in his face. I remembered Pablito as having a beguiling smile. As he stood there looking at me, his smile was as charming as ever. He ran over to where I was sitting and grasped my forearms for a moment, without saying a word. I stood up. He then shook me gently and embraced me. I myself was utterly delighted to see him. I was jumping up and down with an infantile joy. I did not know what to say to him. He finally broke the silence. "Maestro," he said softly, nodding his head slightly, as if he were bowing to me. The title of maestro, teacher, caught me by surprise. I turned around as if I were looking for someone else who was just behind me. I deliberately exaggerated my movements to let him know that I was mystified. He smiled, and the only thing that occurred to me was to ask him how he knew I was there. He said that he, Nestor, and Benigno had been forced to return because of a most unusual apprehension, which made them run day and night without any pause. Nestor had gone to their own house to find out if there was something there that would account for the feeling that had driven them. Benigno had gone to Soledad's place, and he himself had come to the girl's house. "You hit the jackpot, Pablito," La Gorda said, and laughed. Pablito did not answer. He glared at her. "I'll bet that you're working yourself up to throw me out," he said in a tone of great anger. "Don't fight with me, Pablito," La Gorda said, unruffled. Pablito turned to me and apologized, and then added in a very loud voice, as if he wanted someone else in the house to hear him, that he had brought his own chair to sit on, and that he could put it wherever he pleased. "There's no one else around here except us," La Gorda said softly, and chuckled. "I'll bring in my chair anyway," Pablito said. "You don't mind, maestro, do you?" I looked at La Gorda. She gave me an almost imperceptible go-ahead sign with the tip of her foot. "Bring it in. Bring anything you want," I said. Pablito stepped out of the house. "They're all that way," La Gorda said. "All three of them." Pablito came back a moment later, carrying an unusual-looking chair on his shoulders. The chair was shaped to follow the contour of his back, so when he had it on his shoulders, upside down, it looked like a backpack. "May I put it down?" he asked me. "Of course," I replied, moving the bench over to make room. He laughed with exaggerated ease. "Aren't you the Nahual?" he asked me, and then looked at La Gorda and added, "Or do you have to wait for orders?" "I am the Nahual," I said facetiously in order to humor him. I sensed that he was about to pick a fight with La Gorda. She must have sensed it too, for she excused herself and went out the back. Pablito put his chair down and slowly circled around me as if he were inspecting my body. Then he took his low-back, narrow chair in one hand, turned it around, and sat down, resting his folded arms on the back of the chair that was made to allow him the maximum comfort as he sat astride it. I sat down facing him. His mood had changed completely the instant La Gorda left. "I must ask you to forgive me for acting the way I did," he said, smiling. "But I had to get rid of that witch." "Is she that bad, Pablito?" "You can bet on that," he replied. To change the subject, I told him that he looked very fine and prosperous. "You look very fine yourself, maestro," he said. "What's this nonsense of calling me maestro?" I asked in a joking tone. "Things are not the same as before," he replied. "We are in a new realm, and the witness says that you're a maestro now. and the witness cannot be wrong. But he will tell you the whole story himself. He'll be here shortly, and will he be glad to see you again? I think that by now he must have felt that you are here. As we were coming back, all of us had the feeling that you might be on your way, but none of us felt that you had already arrived. I told him then that I had come for the sole purpose of seeing him and Nestor, that they were the only two people in the world with whom I could talk about our last meeting with Don Juan and Don Gennaro, and that I needed more than anything else to clear up the uncertainties that the last meeting had created in me. We're bound to one another, he said. I'll do anything I can to help. You know that. But I must warn you that I'm not as strong as you would want me to be. Perhaps it would be better if we didn't talk at all. But, on the other hand, if we don't talk, we'll never understand anything. In a careful and deliberate manner, I formulated my query. I explained that there was one single issue at the crux of my rational predicament. Tell me, Pablito, I said, did we truly jump with our bodies into the abyss? I don't know, he said. I really don't know. But you were there with me. That's the point. Was I really there? I felt annoyed at his cryptic replies. I had the sensation that I would shake him or squeeze him, that if I would shake him or squeeze him, something in him would be set free. It was apparent to me that he was deliberately withholding something of great value. I protested that he would choose to be secretive with me when he had a bond of total trust. Pablito shook his head as if silently objecting to my accusation. I asked him to recount to me his whole experience, starting from the time prior to our jump, when Don Juan and Don Gennaro had prepared us together for the final onslaught. Pablito's account was muddled and inconsistent. All he could remember about the last moments before we jumped into the abyss was that after Don Juan and Don Gennaro had said goodbye to both of us and had disappeared into the darkness, his strength waned. He was about to fall on his face, but I held him by his arm and carried him to the edge of the abyss, and there he blacked out. What happened after you blacked out, Pablito? I don't know. Did you have dreams or visions? What did you see? As far as I'm concerned, I had no visions, or if I did, I couldn't pay any attention to them. My lack of impeccability makes it impossible for me to remember them. And then what happened? I woke up at Gennaro's old place. I don't know how I got there. He remained quiet while I frantically searched in my mind for a question, a comment, a critical statement, or anything that would add extra breath to his statements. As it was, nothing in Pablito's account was usable to buttress what had happened to me. I felt cheated. I was almost angry with him. My feelings were a mixture of pity for Pablito and myself, and at the same time, a most intense disappointment. I'm sorry I'm such a letdown to you, Pablito said. My immediate reactions to his words was to cover up my feelings and assure him that I was not disappointed at all. "I am a sorcerer," he said, laughing. "A poor one, but enough of one to know what my body tells me. And right now it tells me that you are angry with me." "I am not angry, Pablito," I exclaimed. "That's what your reason says, but not your body," he said. "Your body is angry. Your reason, however, finds no reason to feel anger toward me, so you're caught in a crossfire. The least I can do for you is to untangle this. Your body is angry because it knows that I am not impeccable, and that only an impeccable warrior can help you. Your body is angry because it feels that I am wasting myself. It knew all that the minute I walked through that door." I didn't know what to say. I felt a flood of post-fact realizations. Perhaps he was right in saying that my body knew all that. At any rate, his directness in confronting me with my feelings had blunted the edge of my frustration. I began to wonder if Pablito was not just playing a game with me. I told him that being so direct and bold, he could not possibly be as weak as he pictured himself to be. "My weakness is that I'm made to have longings," he said, almost in a whisper. "I'm even to the point where I long for my life as an ordinary man. Can you believe that?" "You can't be serious, Pablito," I exclaimed. "I am," he replied. "I long for the grand privilege of walking the face of the earth as an ordinary man, without this awesome burden." I found his stand simply preposterous and caught myself exclaiming over and over that he could not possibly be serious. Pablito looked at me and sighed. I was overtaken by a sudden apprehension. He seemed to be on the verge of tears. My apprehension gave way to an intense feeling of empathy. Neither of us could help each other. La Gorda came back to the kitchen at that moment. Pablito seemed to experience an instantaneous revitalization. He jumped to his feet and stomped on the floor. "What the hell do you want?" he yelled in a shrill, nervous voice. "Why are you snooping around?" La Gorda addressed me as if he did not exist. She politely said that she was going to Soledad's house. "What the hell do we care where you go?" he yelled. "You can go to hell for that matter." He stomped on the floor like a spoiled child, while La Gorda stood there laughing. "Let's get out of this house, maestro," he said loudly. His sudden shift from sadness to anger fascinated me. I became engrossed in watching him. One of the features that I had always admired was his nimbleness. Even when he stomped his feet, his movements had grace. He suddenly reached across the table and nearly snatched my writing pad away from me. He grabbed it with the thumb and index finger of his left hand. I had to hold on to it with both hands, using all my strength. There was such an extraordinary force in his pull that if he had really wanted to take it, he could have easily jerked it away from my grip. He let go, and as he retrieved his hand, I saw a fleeting image of an extension to it. It happened so fast that I could have explained it as a visual distortion on my part, a product of the jolt of having to stand up halfway, drawn by the force of his pull. But I had learned by then that I could neither behave with those people in my accustomed manner, nor could I explain anything in my accustomed manner, so I did not even try. "What's that in your hand, Pablito?" I asked. He recoiled in surprise and hid his hand behind his back. He had a blank expression and mumbled that he wanted us to leave that house because he was becoming dizzy. La Gorda began to laugh loudly and said that Pablito was as good a deceiver as Josefina, maybe even better, and that if I pressed him to tell me what was in his hand, he would faint, and Nestor would have to tend to him for months. Pablito began to choke. His face became almost purple. La Gorda told him in a nonchalant tone to cut out the acting because he had no audience. She was leaving, and I did not have much patience. She then turned to me and told me in the most commanding tone to stay there and not go to the Gennaro's house. "Why in the hell not?" Pablito yelled and jumped in front of her as if trying to stop her from leaving. What gall, telling the maestro what to do. "We had a bout with the allies in your house last night," La Gorda said to Pablito, matter-of-factly. "The Nahual and I are still weak from that. If I were you, Pablito, I would put my attention to work. Things have changed. Everything has changed since he came." La Gorda left through the front door. I became aware then that indeed she looked very tired. Her shoes seemed too tight, or perhaps she was so weak that her feet dragged a little bit. She seemed small and frail. I thought that I must have looked as tired. Since there were no mirrors in their house, I had the urge to go outside and look at myself in the side mirror of my car. I perhaps would have done it, but Pablito thwarted me. He asked me in the most earnest tone not to believe a word of what she had said about his being a deceiver. I told him not to worry about that. "You don't like La Gorda at all, do you?" I asked. "You can say that again," he replied with a fierce look. "You know better than anyone alive the kind of monsters those women are. The Nahual told us that one day you were going to come here just to fall into their trap. He begged us to be on the alert and warn you about their designs. The Nahual said that you had one out of 4 chances. If our power was high, we could bring you here ourselves and warn you and save you. If our power was low, we ourselves would arrive here just in time to see your corpse. The 3rd chance was to find you either the slave to the witch Soledad or the slave of those disgusting mannish women. The 4th chance, and the faintest one of all, was to find you alive and well. The Nahual told us that in case you survived, you would then be the Nahual, and we should trust you, because only you could help us. I'll do anything for you, Pablito. You know that. Not just for me. I'm not alone. The witness and Benigno are with me. We are together, and you have to help all of us. Of course, Pablito. That goes without saying. People around here have never bothered us. Our problems are with those ugly, mannish freaks. We don't know what to do with them. The Nahual gave us orders to stay around them no matter what. He gave me a personal task, but I failed at it. I was very happy before. You remember. Now I can't seem to manage my life anymore. What happened, Pablito? Those witches drove me from my house. They took over and pushed me out like trash. I now live in Gennaro's house with Nestor and Benigno. We even have to cook our own meals. The Nahual knew that this might happen and gave La Gorda the task of mediating between us and those three bitches. But La Gorda is still what the Nahual used to call her, 220 buttocks. That was her nickname for years and years, because she tipped the scales at 220 pounds. Pablito chuckled at his recollection of La Gorda. She was the fattest, smelliest slob you'd ever want to see, he went on. Today, she's half her real size, but she's still the same fat, slow woman up there in her head. She can't do a thing for us. But you're here now, Maestro, and our worries are over. Now we are 4 against 4. I wanted to interject a comment, but he stopped me. Let me finish what I have to say before that witch comes back to throw me out, he said as he nervously looked at the door. I know that they have told you that the 5 of you are the same because you are the Nahual's children. That's a lie. You're also like us, the Gennaros, because Gennaro also helped to make your luminosity. You're one of us too. See what I mean? So, don't you believe what they tell you. You also belong to us. The witches don't know that the Nahual told us everything. They think that they are the only ones who know. It took 2 Toltecs to make us. We are the children of both. Those witches. Wait, Pablito, I said, putting my hand over his mouth. He stood up, apparently frightened by my sudden movement. What do you mean that it took 2 Toltecs to make us? The Nahual told us that we are Toltecs. All of us are Toltecs. He said that a Toltec is the receiver and holder of mysteries. The Nahual and Gennaro are Toltecs. They gave us their special luminosity and their mysteries. We received their mysteries, and now we hold them. His usage of the word Toltec baffled me. I was familiar only with its anthropological meaning. In that context, it always refers to a culture of Nahuatl-speaking people in central and southern Mexico, which was already extinct at the time of the conquest. Why did he call us Toltecs? I asked, not knowing what else to say. Because that's what we are. Instead of saying we are sorcerers or witches, he said that we are Toltecs. If that's the case, why do you call the little sisters witches? Oh, that's because I hate them. That has nothing to do with what we are. Did the Nahual tell that to everyone? Why, certainly. Everyone knows. But he never told me that. Oh, that's because you are a very educated man and are always discussing stupid things.